Hey everyone in Birdland, it's time to jump into your non-breeding plumage, kick back with a few tasty invertebrates, and settle in for the next episode of Out There with the Birds with your hosts Ben Lizdas and Bill Thompson III. Out There with the Birds is supported by Kowa Sporting Optics, makers of the new ultra-compact 553 Prominar spotting scope. To learn more, visit sportingoptics.kowa-usa.com. Additional support comes from the Reader Rendezvous Birding Adventures from Birdwatchers Digest. Come birding with us in our favorite places. Learn more at birdwatchersdigest.com/rr. And now here they are, broadcasting from a mudflat near you, Bill and Ben.
Okay, Ben, we're ready for episode 22. I'm sorry that we're not occupying the same space like we were for episode 21, but nonetheless, the Skype version of you is almost as good as the real version of you.
Thanks, Bill. One of the things that, last time we recorded our podcast, we were live together at the Birding Expo in Oaks, Pennsylvania. Great experience. Came home, kind of recuperated from that. One of the first things that I came across on my news feed here on various social media sites was the fact that a fellow you and I both know, Adrian Binns, found a white-winged tern at John Hines National Wildlife Refuge in Pennsylvania, which happened to be one of the birding sites at the expo. Right. Of course, I'm back home and I get this information now. And I mean, how many times as a birder have you found that you just left a place and all of a sudden the mega rarity shows up? I don't know. It seems like it always happens, but granted the fact that's a mega rarity, it doesn't always happen. But this is a bird. This is like a southeastern Europe to Central Asian species. What are the odds it shows up?
It's the laws of the birding universe that the rare birds show up when you're not there, and that's okay, Ben. It's okay, because there'll be another time for you in a white-winged tern.
That's true. That's true. There would be a new bird for me. I'd love to see one. Beautiful looking bird. The photos that I saw, really kind of a dark black with lots of white mottled spots on it. Now, I didn't get a chance to look this bird up in my European field guide to see what its normal state of plumage is, but pretty good looking bird. What was interesting about this sighting, though, is that he saw it while he was out on a big sit.
Nice.
Yes, yeah. And that just makes a sighting like that all the sweeter. And I'm wondering, is this possibly, for this year's big sit competition, which happened nationally, and let's talk more about that in a little bit, the rarest bird seen on a big sit this year?
Well, white-winged tern is very close relative to our black tern. So that's what Adrian would have been sorting out. Was it a white-winged tern or a black tern? He probably would have thought it was a black tern initially, but either one of them would have been a great bird for a big sit. And this one probably is pretty far up there in the pantheon of rare birds found during a big sit. The big sit concept is something that's very near and dear to my heart. I love doing big sits. I have done many, many over the years. I missed this year because my son Liam had a regatta in Pittsburgh, and I needed to drive him up there and be part of it. So parental duties prevented me from doing a big sit. But I did notice, I tried to watch birds as much as I could from the island in the middle of the head of the Ohio Regatta where we were in Pittsburgh, and the birding wasn't very good. So I didn't feel horrible that I wasn't getting to do a big sit this year in 2017 because the birding for me wasn't good. Traditionally, the big sit is the second Sunday in October every year. And do you want me to give you a little history about the big sit?
Yeah, because, I would say that if you're not familiar with the term, there's probably lots of different ways one could interpret the phrase.
Very true.
Big sit.
Yes.
So I'm trying to think of some non-traditional ways one might interpret the phrase big sit.
Well, we could do just a whole episode on that. But, the concept's been around for a long time. Roger Troy Peterson wrote about it in several of his early books and essays. The concept is if you sit in one place long enough, every bird will eventually pass by. Now, I don't know if that might be a little bit of a stretch, but the idea is you sit in one place for as much of 24 hours as you can stand, and you count all the birds you see. Now, of course, over the years, this has evolved. A lot of people now will eBird their big sit, so they're not only counting numbers of species, but they're also counting numbers of individuals. But long about in the late 90s, the New Haven Bird Club in Connecticut decided a couple of their members had kind of modernized the concept and did a big sit at, I believe it was Hammonasset Beach State Park, and they trademarked the name of it. So the New Haven Bird Club in Connecticut owns the trademark to the name The Big Sit, exclamation part, TM, registered, all that stuff. And oh gosh, somewhere in the 2000s, Birdwatchers Digest got involved, largely because I was totally into the big sit concept. And so BWD now is the kind of keeper of the data. And it's in a very non-competitive, kind of easygoing, fun way. So people can go and see results from this year's big sit and all the big sits going back quite a ways by going to birdwatchersdigest.com/big sit, or just go to our website and search for the big sit. Anyway, so the folks at the New Haven Bird Club kind of arbitrarily said, let's make the circle a 17-foot diameter circle. That was big enough to fit their coolers and their hibachi and their birding gear and their scopes.
This is part of what I love about these types of competitions, is these kind of somewhat arbitrary borders or lines or rules that you have to work within, because of course succeeding and coming out on top of a competition like this is how far can you push the limits of things without crossing that border. And so that 17-foot circle seems to me like very meaningful. I don't know, it's maybe an arbitrary figure, but it is absolutely relevant to how one conducts a big sit.
Absolutely. And that circle is a cylinder that goes up indefinitely. So you'll see some pictures if you go to the Big Sit website. You'll see some pictures of people with 12-foot step ladders looking up over a wall or something. You and I have participated in a couple big sits down in Texas, at South Padre, and I did a couple even at Benson State Park, where especially the one at the South Padre Island Visitor Center. Yeah, we're having that big step ladder so we could see up over the arbor and down into the wetlands was very helpful.
Past the dunes, onto the shore, so you get to get shorebirds.
Yeah, one of the things that I'm kind of proud of is, as a big sit fan, is I've brought the big sit concept to a bunch of different birding competitions, and I helped bring it to the World Series of Birding years ago. The last two times I participated in that fine event in May in New Jersey, I did it as a part of a big sit team. The Texas Birding Classic added a big sit category to their, I believe theirs is in April in Texas. And I've done that a bunch of times. That's great. The Champions of the Flyway event over in Israel, you and I were part of the Way Off Coursers, and we did kind of a big stay, really, where we stayed within one place, not a specific sit. But the concept is a great one. I love the more social aspect of it, the less sort of, it's more mentally taxing maybe on you, but less physically taxing in a way, because you really have to focus on what should I be looking for now, and so forth. The one thing that the big sit, the traditional big sit in October, has as a curveball for those of us in, let's say, the Midwest, is that the second weekend in October is kind of past the peak of migration for us. I'm sure it's the same for you up there in Wisconsin.
Yeah.
It's perfect for people in coastal Connecticut, where the big sit was founded. That's right when you're getting the first waterfowl, and still get some late shorebirds, lots of warblers along the coast. And there are places, of course, farther south where this weekend is phenomenal. I believe the record for the fall big sit, I believe it's held by Cape May, a big sit that was done at Cape May Point State Park. So can't be absolutely certain about that, but I'm fairly sure. So you can look at birdwatchersdigest.com, search for big sit, and you can see the results and a lot of the tweets and a lot of the photos that people put up. It's an awesome event.
Another one of those things that really makes big sits interesting, and maybe it's not just big sit but bird races in general, but one thing I really appreciated on a big sit was when we were doing one of the ones out at South Padre Island. We had Michael O'Brien on our team, and getting him out there at midnight in the dark counting nocturnal flight calls from birds going by and helping us identify birds by their nocturnal flight calls it's just an amazing way of expanding a list that you have, just like getting on a ladder to see over the dunes, to see the shorebirds, once you add this audio element, and if you have someone on your team who, like Michael, who really knows these flight sounds, it's like a whole nother dimension to the birding experience. And when you're tallying species like that, boy, does that ever enhance the experience.
Yeah, he's definitely, they call him Moby-Wan, because Michael O'Brien, M-O-B, Moby-Wan Kenobi, because he's such an unbelievable Zen master birder with those night calls. And in fact, his app that he developed called Larkwire is one of the things that teaches you to become, a student to his sensei, his powers. But it's almost an unfair advantage having, it's like bringing Tom Brady to a backyard sandlot football game when you have Michael O'Brien. And really, when he's on your team, your job as a teammate is, yep, got it.
Yeah, exactly. So what was interesting, I was reading a little bit more about the big sit at the John Hines National Wildlife Refuge, just to see, all right, this white-winged tern, what else showed up? And another thing that was interesting was to note the birds that they missed. So that same group that had white-winged tern on theirs, they missed chickadee, mourning dove, and titmouse.
I know. It's always like that. Yeah, it's frustrating too, because I've noticed this virtually every year, where you're looking at your list. You get, for our big sit here in Southeast Ohio, we always would get 85% of the birds by 10 o'clock in the morning, right?
Yeah.
And then you get a drib and drab throughout the rest of the day. And by about 2 o'clock, you're like, oh my gosh, we're missing kestrel, we're missing bluebird, we're missing red-breasted nuthatch. And so you kind of tune in your ears and eyes and your brain and your binoculars to try to nail those birds. And if you don't get one of those birds, it's a reasonably common expected species, it's guaranteed it's going to be one of the first birds you see the next day when you're head out the door, headed into work, every time, man. So this the challenge of it is trying to wring the maximum amount of birds from one spot. And, weather plays a factor in it. And it's a really, really cool thing. And I was heartbroken to miss it this year.
So what, in your opinion, are the keys to success? Let's say I want to do a big sit. So first off, I guess there's a national big sit that happens. You can do one any time of year, anywhere. There's formal and obviously the informal idea of just having a big sit just for fun. But if you want to participate in the big sit event itself, you missed it this year for the national one coming up next fall. If I'm considering scouting for a place to do a big sit, what am I looking for right now so that I can be sure that next fall when I participate, right, I've got the right spot?
Okay, that's a really good question. So you want a variety of habitats meeting in one place. Ideally, you'll have a lot of sky so you can catch flyovers. You'll have some open grassland. You'll have some woodland edge, maybe some deeper woods. You'll have some bird feeders. You'll have, ideally, some water, maybe an open, gravelly or muddy area. I mean, really, you just want as many different habitat types as you can possibly have. And it also helps to be up high, on top of a hill. Mm-hmm. I built a birding tower on my house at Indigo Hill specifically for the big sit. It's nuts, but being up high like that
it is nuts.
It's just a supreme advantage to being up on a high vantage point, because you can see mm-hmm. below you, you can see out, you can scan the horizon. A lot of the great birds that we've gotten over the years at big sits have been things that you pick up because you're scanning with your binoculars, and there's a black vulture, I got a raptor approaching over here at 4 o'clock. Okay, let's all get on this bird and see what it is. And the neat thing is as the bird gets closer, sometimes it morphs. It's not even a raptor. Sometimes it's a rock dove or a cormorant, or sometimes it morphs into something really special. Like one year we had a super late or super early rough-legged hawk. And we've added new birds to our property list at the big sit. So you just never know what's going to show up.
But you want lots of sky. You want pretty much lots of sky and diverse habitat. Exactly. If you want to get those woodland birds, you want to be able to look to the woods. You don't want to be in the woods itself for a big sit.
No. Now, one of the rules that's kind of interesting with the big sit is if you see a bird and you can't identify it, within the rules of the traditional fall second Sunday in October big sit, you can leave the count circle, to go verify what the bird is. But ideally, you have to say, I think I just had a Lincoln sparrow. I'm going to go ground truth it. And you can leave and go clarify, or verify rather, what the bird is. You can't, however, count any birds that you see while you're there. So I did that one year. I saw a sparrow flying and I thought it was a Lincoln sparrow. I went out there. I got the Lincoln sparrow, but while I was there, I also got a Savannah sparrow, but I couldn't count it. So I ran back up and got into the count circle and scanned and scanned and scanned. Finally, the Savannah sparrow showed itself. So it became a legal addition to the list.
So let's say I'm sitting in a big sit circle. Could I send someone from that circle out to just kind of look around so they could say, oh yeah, there's a northern mockingbird over here. Just keep your eyes out over here when it pops up.
No.
Yeah.
That's not legal.
That's been in the rules a little bit, isn't it?
Yes. However, what you can do is this. For example, if you have people coming throughout the day, because the big sit's really a social thing. What you win by having the highest species count in your state or country or even in the world is bragging rights. I mean, there's no award. You don't get a trophy, or your name doesn't go up on a plaque in the Hall of Fame.
We haven't landed that giant bank sponsorship yet.
No,
the Wells Fargo trophy is not coming to the big sit nearest you anytime soon, huh?
Well, you never know. So the big sit's really a social birding event when I do it anyway. And, we often will have a cookout, or people bring soup, and they'll bring stuff in crock pots and brownies and cookies and pepperoni rolls and everything. So people are coming and going all the time. Now, it's perfectly okay for somebody to come up and come to the circle and say, hey, I saw a flock of turkeys on my way in, and then you can look for the turkeys, which, or something to that effect. But you can't send somebody out to look for something and have them report back. I mean, again, there's no, like, the rules committee isn't going to come and pound your door down with a battering ram and put you in handcuffs and make you do the perp walk out to the birdmobile. So it's it's just a matter of how much you want to follow the rules. But there are rules, and it's like I said, the neat thing I like about it is that on Saturday and Sunday, because a lot of people, for whatever reasons, religious, personal, whatever, scheduling, can't do a big sit on Sunday. So we opened it up a few years ago so people could also do it on the Saturday before the second Sunday. The founders at the New Haven Bird Club are, still believe that the only true one is that second Sunday. But it's a social thing, and it's really, really fun. I love the feeling that everyone around the world is doing a big sit at that same moment, at that same time. It's just kind of a cool thing.
So on that note, where is the best place in the world for a big sit? And I guess I would ask that question. You can either answer it from where would you like to do one most, or where do you think is technically the best place in the world where you could possibly get the most species?
You know what? We would need to ask Watson, the IBM computer, for that answer probably, because it just depends on where in the world you want to be. I don't know the comings and goings of migration and seasonality of bird abundance well enough to know. This might be a question that eBird could answer someday. But someplace like a Cape May Point, or a Outer Banks, or High Island in spring, or someplace where you're getting waves and waves and waves of birds, plus a whole bunch of resident birds. I can definitely tell you that Whipple, Ohio is never going to be the best place in the second Sunday of October to see, to have the world's biggest big sit, because we just don't have we don't have any shore, we don't have a big body of water. We're basically going to always be between 50 and 70 birds.
It's a different kind of mentality from some of like the big day or big year type records where, I know that I think it's Peru right now has the record for the most species seen in a day. And if you look at the terrain and the elevation there with the various ecotypes, you can see how that would be the case. But because you can see the most birds there in a day does not necessarily mean it would be a good big sit location, because you're sitting at a certain elevation state in a certain forest, you're not going to have that diversity within a 17-foot circle. So it's, and this is what I mean by those parameters sort of make these little different birding challenges somewhat fun.
Absolutely. Now, if you could arrange to be on a relatively vertical uh, mountainside in Peru or Colombia or Ecuador, and you could have a hot air balloon that was tethered on a rope and would only go up inside a 17-foot
A
diameter
17
circle.
foot diameter.
You could start at the lowlands and bird all the way up, and assuming that the cliff face was as vertical as possible and you got a variety of habitats, you could probably break the world big sit record.
Let's do it.
Yeah, let's do it. We just need a balloon company and some riggers and a couple of plane tickets.
I'm going to start training tomorrow.
Like a case of beer. Yeah.
So, so I'm leaving tomorrow to go to Costa Rica for this birding challenge, this Costa Rica birding challenge.
Yes, you are. And I'm not leaving tomorrow to go to Costa Rica.
I know. I'm taking your place there, Bill, in spirit, although in personality that would be an impossible task.
No hard feelings, Ben. I'm glad somebody's getting to go and enjoy themselves down there. It's going to be awesome.
It's going to be fantastic. So, I'm going there with a international team of bird watchers, and we're going to spend 10 days just birding the pants off Costa Rica, if I can say that on the podcast. We're going to bird the pants off Costa Rica. So a ton of birds, a lot of laughs, probably very little sleep. It should be a really good time. It's a rainy season there, so I'm expecting there's going to be probably a bunch of rain as well. But I've been kind of preparing for this trip to get the most out of it and get myself in this counting birds mindset by picking up Noah Stricker's new book, which is Birding Without Borders. Have you heard about this book?
Yeah.
So Noah did this big year, and so I just a couple chapters into it, fantastic already. So I don't want to give away any spoilers about the book, and I can't give away too many because, like I said, I'm only a few chapters into it. But this guy is starting out his big year, so he's taking a year to bird around the world nonstop, not taking a single day off, which to me just seems like an incredible physical feat in and of itself. But he starts it out in style. The book opens with him, the stroke after midnight, January 1st. You always make a big deal, Bill, I know, about what's going to be the first bird you see of the year.
Yeah.
And Noah is in the upper deck of a Russian scientific exploration vessel in a hot tub in the Antarctic.
Perfect.
A couple bottles of champagne with a couple other onboard naturalists bringing in the new year to see the new bird. Now that to me is not only starting the book out in style, but starting the trip out in style. And of course, you're imagining, his first bird's going to be a penguin, an emperor penguin or a king penguin. So my Costa Rica adventure, not quite that crazy, but like I said, I'm kind of just mentally preparing for the fun and that kind of what you're going to see next, how you're going to count it, etc. But thinking back on Noah's trip, this guy, like I said, birded an entire year, did not take a single break, lived out of a backpack, saw over 60,000 or 6,000 species, went to 41 different countries. And looking at the opposite of a big sit, I don't know what you'd call this a big year, a global big year, I guess, but it almost doesn't even seem to me to do justice to just the logistical and endurance aspects of something like this.
No, it's incredible. Now, was he in the hot tub for the entire year that he was traveling around?
I haven't gotten that far into the book yet. I have a feeling that probably not. Can you imagine how wrinkly your skin would be?
There would be some pruning. Yes.
There'd be some serious pruning going on. But I know that you're gonna get Noah on the This Birding Life podcast sometime coming up here in the near future. Listeners, stay tuned for that. You should ask him that question.
I will. And you and Noah and I shared a little bit of an experience together judging the bird call contest at the Kachemak Bay Shorebird Festival some years ago, as I recall.
That's right. One of my one of my brushes with birding celebrity right there. You and Noah. So
I think we made a Noah sandwich, if I remember.
But that guy, like I said, such an incredible thing to accomplish. You seeing these over 6,000 species is one thing, but really just to be able to logistically plan and pull off something like that. He would probably be a good person maybe to ask where the best spot in the world would be for a big sit.
Yeah, I think he'd have insight on that you and I don't have because of his experience. It's an incredible thing he did. I can't wait to read the book, and can't wait to talk to Noah and interview him about it, pick his brain.
And I would say someone with as much gumption as he does, and as strong of an ability to get things done as Noah can do, because obviously he's a go-getter. If anyone can make our hot air balloon, our 16-foot diameter hot air balloon big sit, figuratively and literally get off the ground, it would be Noah. So I think we should propose this to him.
Okay. Let's make that a condition.
A hot air balloon, big sit in Peru.
But it has to have a hot tub in it.
With a hot tub in
It has to be a hot tub air balloon.
I wonder if you had just the right optics, if you could get high enough, could you see a penguin? Possibly.
Quite possibly, if you were high. And on that note.
All right, so final exercise here, okay? So, sometimes I like to dive into ornithology and the science of birds and just kind of, read academic papers here and there just to see what's going on and what we're learning about birds and what it might be able to tell us about life in general and reflect on our human condition. So
God, Ben, that made my head hurt. What you just said.
You know what? That's just the beginning because I'm going to make it hurt even more.
Okay.
So the AUK recently came out with a paper, and what I'm going to do is I just want to read you the title of this study that they published, and I want you to take the science language here and just put it in plain human English what this study is about, if you can.
Okay.
Here is the title of this study. Evidence of phenotypic plasticity of penis morphology and delayed reproductive maturation in response to male competition in waterfowl.
Okay.
So as you're looking through the card catalog and you look that up, judging a book by its cover, what's that study going to be about?
It's going to be about competition and size mattering in male duck private parts.
I think you cut through the chase there and you kind of nailed it a little bit.
Nailed it.
Nailed it. Interesting thing about this, though, they were studying ruddy ducks and lesser scaup.
And ruddy ducks are famous the world over. Males are.
Yes, they are famous the world over. They are a very promiscuous species. And so they would this is just a little interesting thing about the study. Lesser scaup they would find as the size of their duck parts would, this plasticity, sometimes they would get bigger, sometimes they would get smaller depending on the level of competition that they were experiencing with how many males were in one area. Ruddy ducks didn't do that. Ruddy ducks had very little plasticity. I guess they're a pretty well hung duck as it is.
Well, they are super well endowed.
But what ruddy ducks would do is that they would essentially have shorter windows of time where they would become reproductively active, or they would turn it off. So if there's a whole bunch of them gathered together, they would essentially take turns being in their reproductive cycle instead of trying to outcompete with one another.
Okay, good to know.
So there you go.
We humans should try that.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out how this translates into potential human behavior or how we might want to conduct ourselves to have.
Yeah, I don't think we want to touch that with a 10-foot ruddy duck. You know what? But
what could possibly go wrong?
Because ruddy duck males, I believe their male duck parts are corkscrew shaped and barbed, spiked.
Wow.
I believe that's true.
Could you elaborate on that, Bill?
No, I cannot.
All right. Well, on that note.
All right, Ben. Thanks for the nightmare.
You bet, Bill. That sounds good. Thanks, man.
All right, buddy.
Bye.
That's all she wrote for this episode of Out There with the Birds. Special thanks to Koa, our optics sponsor. Learn more about their fine line of birding products at sportingoptics.koa-usa.com. We're also supported by the Reader Rendezvous Birding Adventures from Birdwatchers Digest. Your next birding adventure starts at birdwatchersdigest.com/rr. Until we meet again in 2 weeks, keep the wind at your back and your eyes to the skies, and we'll see you out there with the birds. Cheers!
Hang on.